Good Thursday morning. Happy New Year's. Hope everybody is ready to get rid of 2020 and enter, 2021. You know, it, as a new person, but they say new year, new me, right? So you can, you know, get this whole dead year gone and rebirth into a new year, into hopefully, we can all just reset this whole thing and get on with it, right? Life just keeps moving on, right? It keeps on spinning like the wheels on the bus. You all know that. So, at least that's a positive note, right? I mean, we can at least go, at least this next year we want to be able to do blah, 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 and keep realistic goals. I mean, that's what I think. And we should be doing right now instead of just bitching and griping and moaning, Setting goals, having some, that's going to give you some hope, make up with some purpose. Is going, today I'm going to get this stuff done. At least if it's even just stuff around the house or the yard or the community or whatever, you know what I mean? Just the little stuff will add up to the bigger stuff, It's levels to that kind of shit, But, I'm going to give you a quote from Al Capone, one of the real last American gangsters, or gangsters. A lot of people think they're gangsters, but they're really not. They're just punks and thugs and stuff, which is not anything to aspire to, John Gotti kind of messed up that whole thing, kind of ruined it, and now you kind of see it all going downhill. So I'm going to be idolizing this kind of stuff, but this is a really good quote. He was born the same year my great-grandparents were, 1889. And the year my parents were, my mom was born, 1947. So, and his quote is, Bolshevism is knocking at our gates. We can't afford to let it in. We must keep America whole and safe and unspoiled. We must keep the worker away from red literature and red ruses. We must see that his mind remains healthy. And by red, he means red communism, red China, red, all that, not red as Republican, all that stuff. So, we know that. We know what they're doing. And then you have Caius Verus Catullus. He's a Roman poet from 87 to 54 BC. Let us live in love, my Lesbia, and value at a penny all the talk of crabbed old men. Suns may set and rise again. For us, when our brief light has set, there's the sleep of one everlasting night. Give me 1,000 kisses. And then you have Louis Ferdinand Céline. He's French novelist and a Nazi collaborator. But, the real one, not the ones people call today, which is just English, they don't like, right? To tell the truth, a continent without war is bored. As soon as the bulges start up, the bugles start up, it's a holiday, total vacation, and the bloodlust. So there's your quotes for the day. Think about that. That's food for thought right there. That's like, COVID. As COVID is right now, a lot of people are really just talking about the vaccine or themselves. They're mostly worried because, the media kind of hypes up that fear talk of, worry about your own kind of stuff. And that's why we're seeing kind of like a lot of these people, like, they're not at risk, or seniors or frontline workers trying to get the vaccine, and it's just, but I think that more talk should more be on the lockdowns, which is detrimental. And you see places like Texas and Florida that are opened up and are doing well. Restaurants are fine. The science is not behind locking all that kind of stuff down, which is important to know, right? If we want to be based on science, then data proves that we should at least have the restaurants opened up. If they can have, we understand. A lot of these people have food cards and stuff like that. So they have to go through classes to understand communicable diseases and how to not spread E. coli, salmonella, and stuff like that. They can be cleaning. They could be having all that kind of stuff. You could do like a 3 strikes thing where, how Joe Biden with the 94 crime bill did 3 strikes throughout and warehoused a lot of just not only just black people, but, white people and just low class people that, just versus slave labor. So we could kind of do something similar where if you had 3 of these health violations or whatever, then you can start shutting it down like that and talking about that kind of stuff. But just doing it to just everybody like that, it's not right. Especially when you're giving larger corporations like Walmart, Amazon, and other places like that, special privileges. So we know that this is not really based on science; it's selective, right? Which is not right. But I think that as we are talking about the lockdowns and everybody staying at home, like in my house, like when I was go to school, right, that was my only real time away from not being by my stepdad who was abusing me, my mom who would let it, and my sisters who would abuse me and stuff like that, right? And so like it was really my only real paradise, right? People say like these days like, oh, all these kids have to go to school because they're not getting their food, blah 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 blah. Well, that was my really safe haven from. I mean, even though I would get bullied at school from whatever, but I wasn't getting like physically beat, right? And so, and then there was other counselors that I would talk to, like Miss French, whatever, and she would, and then that way I could actually tell them what was going on in the school without having to call the police or whatever, and then they could deal with that kind of stuff, and then, and so I think that with the schools not being opened, with a lot of this other stuff where people can be going to like YMCA's or stuff like that, kids aren't being able to um, inform what's going on, right? And so, therefore, we're losing a lot of information that way. You're seeing a lot of crime otherwise spike it. So if and if it's happening outside of these areas, just imagine what's going on in the home, right? Because I mean, these people have to be somewhere. And if we're letting all these people out of prison too, they have to go somewhere, right? And so most likely they're going home with children and everything else, and then so it's just more of a chaotic, unstable situation. And then you have these other people who have stable homes and everything like that are making these kinds of judgments, and it's kind of um, I can't find the right word for that right now, but this is why we're seeing a big old divide, in a rift, right? And you have a lot of this stuff, and you wonder why people staying home from school, not learning anything. What are they going to do, right? They're going to be going out and they're going to be causing a ruckus like a fuckus, because idle hands make the devil's playground. We all know that, and if kids aren't really learning anything, they don't have any real good role models. What are they going to do? They're going to go and they're going to be juvenile delinquents, right? So now we have even more kids and more generations at risk and at for a detrimental lifestyle, instead of making them productive members of society and good members of role models with strong families, strong marriages, and strong values. We're making them all encouraging to go down the wrong roads. And I don't understand that at all, right? And for these were highly educated people in office, like that doesn't make any sense, right? So how smart are these people, right? But I want to talk to you about an article from biomedsentral.com, and it's about child, adolescent, psychiatry, mental health, whatever. But it's family violence against children in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic, a review of current perspective and risk factors. In the abstract, the situation of crisis produced by the COVID-19 pandemic poses major challenges to societies all over the world. While efforts to contain the virus are vital to protect global health, these same efforts are exposing children and adolescents to an increased risk of family violence. Various criminological theories explain the cases of this new danger. The social isolation required by the measures taken in the different countries, the impacts on jobs, the economic instability, high levels of tension and fear of the virus, the new forms of relationships have all increased levels of stress in the most vulnerable families, and therefore the risk of violence. I used to get beat sometimes just for saying a joke or whatever. That was one time fine, whatever. It's boom. I mean, so it's very, because they're crackheads, you know what I mean? And so you can't really predict that. I mean, now we're having all, and now some of them can't even get their crack. And so, just imagine how that is, right? Like, some of us grew up with alcoholic parents. We know how that can be. So just imagine. Now you have this kind of situation, and now you're in a home. It's almost like a pressure cooker just ready to explode, and we can't be having that. That's why we need to open up America now. That's why we have to have better leaders. That's why we have to recall Gavin Newsom and everything else. These lockdowns are not working. These more restrictions are not working, and they're just going to start using this stuff to just keep clamping down until people start actually getting up and saying stuff and actually getting rid of these people, because these people aren't really good at their jobs. They're just in it for the money and in it for themselves. And we need to understand that just because people say a bumper sticker doesn't mean they're actually for you. Okay? Okay? Forrest Gump shit. In addition, mandatory lockdowns imposed to curb the spread of the disease have trapped children in their homes, isolating them from the people and the resources that could help them, like I was just saying. In general, the restrictive measures imposed in many countries have not been accompanied by an analysis of the access to the resources needed to reduce the risk. It is necessary to take an urgent measure to intervene in these high-risk contexts so that children and adolescents can develop and prosper in a society which is likely to undergo profound changes, but when in which the defense of their rights and protection must remain a major priority. And now we're changing it at such a high risk and a high tech world that a lot of these people aren't going to be able to know what we're doing anything. And why are we doing that? We really need to ask ourselves, what kind of a society do these leaders in Congress, right, want, and what kind of are they building and stuff? Because I mean, we need well-formed, we need smarter people, we need to be competitive, we need the American ingenuity to always be the champion of the world, people. That's how it works. Okay, so keep punching at it, keep hammering at it, keep whatever you gotta do, keep pushing it until it fucking happens, people. Come on. Because these people, I mean, you guys are just waiting at home on the couch watching Netflix and stuff, just waiting for the government to tell you everything's fine, and that's never gonna happen, right? Because now they find out that they're like high priestess of Babylon, and they're loving this idol worship, right? So stop it, people. Wake up and go back to work, and let's do this now. Okay? Because I mean, the only thing people really should be having pride in, rather than this stuff that's like really dumb, like the stuff you can't really change, like your skin complexion, which I living in the world, I became really like pale and stuff, but like, you know, or you know, your looks, or you know, stuff like that. That's kind of retarded. But you should have pride in your work. What you know, and what can you really do, and what can you provide, and what is your benefit? Almost like I'm like kind of like the guy in Office Space. I'm just there. And what do you do here? What is your what do you do here? We don't have to downsize. But we need to downsize Congress. The government, because big gov sucks. We all know this. And background. In terms of the frequency and impact, violence and exposure to violence in the immediate family context are among the most serious forms of victimization. These forms of victimization usually may include physical abuse, psychological or emotional, sexual neglect, and exposure to intimate partner violence. The worldwide estimates of prevalence in self-report surveys at 22.6% of physical abuse, 36.3% of emotional, 7.6% among boys, and 18% among girls for sexual abuse, 16.3% for physical neglect, and 18% for emotional neglect. Pretty high. Regarding childhood exposure to intimate partner violence, the data available are still limited. However, it is estimated that between 133 and 275 million children are exposed to this kind of violence each year. In spite of the gaps in the measurement of childhood victimization, these high rates of violence and exposure to family violence reveal that interpersonal violence against children constitutes a serious global social and health problem. Save our children, remember hashtag, but yet, where are you guys at? You guys log down, blah, 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 because you guys are have this passive narcissism of virtue signaling that makes you guys think that you guys are like sainthood, but it's not, okay? And you guys are sick, and you guys need help, and you guys need to start realizing that we all have the right to be able to be free, to be sick, to be healthy, to whatever, but that's your decision. Like, the world is like, they say it's a marathon or a race, right? So we're all running, right? But you see, like in the Olympics, it's got those little stripes, right? Because when you're running in your little lane, people have to stay in their own little lanes. People can go, hey, you're drifting in this little lane, and that's how you guide people into doing, you know, whatever. But you gotta run the race like I am and say, that's not how this happens. You know what I mean? Because everybody's experience and journey is different, and it's supposed to be that way because that's what makes life beautiful. And we all share that, and we all go, oh wow, and that's the art of the world, right? For violence researchers, the measures taken in response to COVID present an extraordinary opportunity to advance our understanding of the social, psychological, and economic and situational mechanisms that influence rates of violence. In fact, contexts associated with the pandemic create an environment in which children's sociological systems are disrupted, and as a result, the incidence of child maltreatment is likely to increase. However, many children welfare organizations around the world are noting a significant drop in reports of child abuse or neglect. We know nothing. We know little, but we know little about the amount of violence that children and adolescents have faced in their homes since the beginning of the pandemic, and institutions like UNICEF have discouraged the performance of epidemiological studies in children unless their protection can be guaranteed. Thus, it is necessary to intervene indirectly by detecting contexts of risk and by exploring the factors that may increase violence against children and youth as to be taken successful action. And there's a lot of times where, like, if I was like tell, like I said, call the cop. That's why I had to tell like something and make it seem anonymous, remember, because if my stepdad found out, remember, then I would be like going to probably to the hospital with a broken bone, because I mean, I've had my arms dislocated, I've had my nose kind of broken, stuff like that. You know, I watched my mom get beat up in the head, and I mean, it happens, and so therefore you're kind of like, you know, in a Stockholm syndrome, and then you don't want to tell in fear of everything. And it's kind of like how people are getting browbeaten right now into falling in line lockstep with the lockdown and making people and almost like forcing become the ultimate hallmarker and forcing these people to just dictate and fall in line instead of just saying, hey, you're kind of messing up here. Shouldn't you be caring more? And if not, okay, well then boom, and then just boom, just kind of like, like the ugly duckling says, but we are not doing that kind of stuff. Why? Because we're just like, oh, look at me, look at me, look at me, and that's kind of like the retardedness of America right now. And we gotta just stop doing that kind of stuff and actually just be more proactive, but also understand that people have the right to be stupid. But we shouldn't elect those people. Like Pelosi's got to go, Mitch McConnell's got to go. A lot of these old guards and stuff have to go. All they've been doing is getting rich, and we're troubling and dying, and Congress is just lying and delaying. I mean, all they've been doing is railing and derailing, but they can never just be real. Have you ever noticed that? The COVID-19 pandemic may have entailed major changes for many children and their families, not just because of the lockdown, restricted measures, social isolation, changing demographics, and the reduction of available health services, but also due to the sudden and possible long-term increase in child poverty, family uncertainty. The pandemic represents a global crisis not only for our health and economy, but also for family well-being through a cascading process of factors that can drive, participate, and exacerbate potential stressors. The situation generated by COVID-19 has few precedents, but we can build on the work in crisis or emergency situations where scenarios of rapidly increasing stress are accompanied by abrupt changes to prior conditions. See, it's very important. You see, and it goes on, but this is more of a hypothesis, but I just wanted to give you a glimpse of what's going on right here with child abuse. Anyway, right here we have another article where it says 250,000 cases of child abuse or neglect may have gone unreported in the U.S. A recent study published in the Journal of Child Abuse and Neglect has reported that a number of child maltreatment reports and child... He wants some of that wood. But he ain't a woodchuck. Has reported a number of child maltreatment reports and child welfare interventions decreased significantly in New York City during the initial phase of the coronavirus and disease in 2019 pandemic. A reduction in child protective services investigations has also been observed. Overall, the findings suggest that healthcare providers and teachers should be more attentive about detecting possible signs of child abuse during one-line child interactions and sessions. But if people aren't going to school, if people and cops are being defunded and everything else, how are people going to be able to detect this? Especially if everybody's staying in line and staying at home, and then you got everything online, and you could just cut them out of the picture loop, right? How is anybody really going to know? How are you going to know for sure? That's why we have to have an open society, and we have to have it now. All right. Otherwise, this is going to just keep going on and on and on and on and on. Like it's a cycle, right? And then it's a cycle of violence and abuse, and we have to learn how to break it. And by doing that, we have to all be aware of this, consciously be aware of this, and understand what's going on. And that's how we can break it. And then that's how we can change it and go on to a new flashpoint almost, right? To curb the spread of severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, the causative pathogen for COVID-19, pharmaceutical control measures such as mask wearing, hand washing, social distancing, moving restrictions, and closing of schools and daycare centers and workplaces have been strictly implemented in many countries across the world. Although these measures have helped manage the pandemic's health-related aspects, they have put a significant burden on the country's economies in general. Studies conducted during previous pandemic situations have related that pandemic-related changes such as a social isolation, loss of job, financial hardship, parenting stress, increased alcohol, illicit drug consumption, and emotional distress can significantly increase the risk of family violence, including child abuse. However, because of the pandemic-related restrictions, professionals who are competent for recognizing child abuse cases have limited access to children and their families. This may lead to unreporting of child maltreatment cases, which is child abuse. The current study has been undertaken to evaluate the extent of unreporting of child maltreatment cases by different professionals such as educators and healthcare providers. The scientists estimated the number of child maltreatment cases monthly received by child protection community in New York City from January 2015 to May 2020. They have evaluated the number of investigations carried out by child protective services during this period. Right. Specifically, they analyzed the data collected between January 2015 and February 2020 by seasonal autoregressive integrated moving average modeling to investigate the deviation between observed. They predicted numbers of child maltreatment cases and child care investigators for March, April, and May 2020. They separately analyzed the cases reported by authorized reports, educators, social service providers, law enforcement officers, and medical and mental health personnel, and non-authorized reporters, caregivers, friends, neighbors, and etc. Important observations to note. The scientists observed that a lower than expected number of child maltreatment cases were reported in March, April, and May in New York City. Moreover, the reduction in reporting was significant to all subgroups of reporters. A reduction in the number of investigations carried out by CPS was also noted in the study. Specifically, the number of children maltreatment reporting reduced by 29% in March, then by 50% in April and May. The scientists believe the reporting of child maltreatment cases is likely due to pandemic-related restrictions such as closures of schools and daycare centers, which is why we need to open them up now and get the kids in school, because they're not. We've already know. Science says that they're more likely to be asymptomatic, let's put it that way, and not be spreading the disease, whereas older people are likely to. So let's keep them home. Let's open up and let's get the younger, healthier people into work and providing and making this country great and more prosperous and richer and better than ever before. That's how we're going to build back better. I mean, come on, people. It's common sense, right? And then, real quick on the corona thing, real quick, since we're on that. I think this will load. Buffering. Hey, out of the wood, boo. Out of the wood, boo boo. We're not out of the woods now. Hey, boo. You good boy. The New York Post is reporting on the corona that scientists study melatonin as possible COVID treatment. Melatonin, a dietary supplement often used by insomnia sufferers, could be used to possibly help prevent or treat COVID-19, according to researchers at the Cleveland Clinic. The hormone, which regulates the sleep and wake cycle, was associated with an almost 30% reduced likelihood of contracting the disease, the scientists said in research and published in the journal PLOS Biology, Cairo 7 reported. Additional studies are required about the over-the-counter supplement. It's very important to note these studies do not suggest people should go and take melatonin without consulting their physician. Like I said, it's always important to trust your doctor and never lie to your doctor and your dentist, because they always know and it can kill you. Large-scale observation studies and randomized controlled trials are critical to validate the clinical benefit of melatonin for patients with COVID. But we are excited about the associations put forth in this study and the opportunity to further explore them. So they've gotten their go-ahead to study melatonin, and that is a good therapeutic. You should probably take it if you have a hard time sleeping. And then real quick, we're going to just go to the Nashville bomber's girlfriend warned he was building explosives. This is Philadelphia, ABC 6. Nashville, Tennessee. More than a year before Anthony Warner, when that's probably, we shouldn't really be saying his name and giving these people the notoriety that they want, detonated a bomb in downtown Nashville on Christmas. Officers visited his home after his girlfriend told police that he was building bombs in his RV trailer at his residence, according to documents obtained by the Associated Press, but they were unable to make contact with him or see inside his RV, which is, they would need a warrant. They would need more than just a person just saying something like that, especially if the person has no criminal history, no, red flag, whatever as they could do mental health wise or anything. Otherwise it could just be a scorned lover, it could just be vindictiveness, it could, all kinds of other stuff. But that's probably why they went and checked it out and put it on their back burner, and then was like, oh, we'll check it out, but other stuff came up and they just forgot about it, because to them it was like whatever. But almost like the Nicholas Cruz thing, there was 13 people with the name, but that's name spelling. They could have stopped Stoneman out, but they didn't, right? But hindsight is 2020, so we have to give these people kind of slack, because freedom of speech is kind of murky that way. Officers were called to Pamela Perry's home in Nashville on October 21st. After getting a report from her attorney that she was making suicidal threats while sitting on her front porch with firearms, the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department said in an email statement. At a police reported Raymond Throckmorton, the attorney, told officers the day he also represented Warner. You okay? When officers arrived at Perry's home, police said she had two unloaded pistols sitting next to her on the porch. She told them those guns belonged to Tony Warner. Police said she did not want them in the house any longer. Then 62 was then transported for a psychological evaluation after speaking to mental health professionals on the phone. Throckmorton told the Tennessean that Perry had fears about her safety and thought Warner may harm her. The attorney was also at the scene that day and told officers Warner frequently talks about the military and bombing making. Warner knows what he is doing and is capable of making a bomb, Throckmorton said to responding officers. Police then went to Warner's home and located about 1.5 miles from Perry's home, so not that far. But he didn't answer the door when they knocked several times. They saw the RV in the backyard, Dee reported, but the yard was fenced off and officers couldn't see inside the vehicle. The report said there were also several security cameras and wires attached to an alarm sign on the front door. Officers then noticed supervisors and detectives notified. They saw no evidence of a crime and had no authority to enter his home or fence property. And everybody has to know every case is different. It's case by case basis. You can't just measure one case by this case and everything else because there's all different fluid factors. After officers visited Warner's home last August, the police department hazardous devices unit bomb squad was given a copy of the police report during the week of August 26. They contacted Throckmorton. Police said officers recalled Throckmorton saying Warner did not care for the police and that he wouldn't allow Warner to permit a visual inspection of the RV. Throckmorton disputes that he told the police that he couldn't search the vehicle. I have no memory of that whatsoever, he told the Tennessean. I didn't represent him anymore. He wasn't an active client. I'm not a criminal defense attorney. Throckmorton told the New York newspaper that he represented Warner in a civil case several years ago and that Warner was no longer his client. Somebody somewhere dropped the ball, and he doesn't want blame. A day after officers visited Warner's home, the police report identifying information about Warner were sent to the FBI to check their databases and determine whether Warner had prior military connections. Later that day, the police department said the FBI reported back that they checked their holdings and found no records of Warner at all, so he wasn't in their database. 6 days later, the FBI reported the Department of Defense checks on Warner were all negative, so he was just Joe Schmo, just a law-abiding citizen. No other information about Warner, which is a good movie. Warner came home to the department or the FBI's attention after August 2019. At no time was there any evidence of a crime detected or no additional action was taken. The ATF also had no information. See, the only arrest he had was in 1978 for marijuana. The bombing happened on Christmas morning, well before downtown streets were bustling with activity. Police were responding to reported shots fired. A recording. We all know that, right? He was. Then 1964 hits downtown, so that was trying to be a little insidious comedy there. It's kind of gross. They still have not really uncovered a motive, but if you look over here, Fox News has been reporting the man suspected of detonating the bomb on Christmas may have followed a number of conspiracy theories believed in lizard people and spent time hunting for aliens, not the illegal kind crossing the Mexican border, but the ones coming down from Spain. And according Warner 63 may have also feared the 5G technology was a threat to health and liberty, like Ted Kaczynski's Industrial Revolution status. The unnamed sources reportedly found conspiracy-minded writings authored by Warner, and investigators were looking into whether his beliefs had anything to do with the explosion. He could have just been mental breakdown, and he was just, weak mind, kind of stuff like that. That's why it's also kind of important to keep in contact, build intimate relationships with your neighbors. They're not too intimate. Intimate doesn't have to be like, but it could be just, more than just hi, bye, in the hallway, because otherwise this kind of stuff does happen. And you go, I didn't know how, and then you want to blame everybody else when it's all of us. Community means all of us. The lizard people conspiracy, popularized by controversial British writer David Icke and others, posted that shape-shifting alien reptiles can assume human form in a bid to take over the world. Icke was banned from Twitter last month after allegedly spreading COVID-19 and attacking Dr. Anthony Fauci. He had already been banned from Facebook and YouTube and also embraced 5G conspiracies. Authorities have not released a motive for the bombing, but Warner showed some odd behavior. He gave away his car, saying he had cancer. He transferred the deed to his house for free. He told his employer that he was retiring. Law enforcement seized some of his belongings during their investigation, including a computer and a storage drive, just like they did with the Hunter Biden laptop from hell. And we wonder where that's going. You guys stop to steal this election, because that's what they're trying to do. That's what they did with COVID. That's why they're not going to let us open and everything else, because they've realized that with this, they can steal everything else, control you, and they ain't going to do anything about it, because they're just acting like a little bitch. You know what I mean? So, I mean, what are you going to do? Really, what are you going to do about it? I mean, that's basically what they're saying. You got Gavin Newsom out there just, doing whatever he wants. Hey, I'm sorry, guys, I just won't do that again. Hey, what do you think? Hey. And that's Pelosi's nephew, okay? So, but you, they really don't, right? And like you said, these only arrests came in 1978 on a marijuana charge. But there were some of these red flags that people could have said, hey, what the fuck, right? But if we had an open society, we could have these, at least these social workers, like they said they want, come into his house and saying, what's going on, bro? What's happening, right? But we don't got that, right? Because these leaders don't really care. They're just trying to funnel some money out. They're just trying to, control you and just live a lavish life like they did back in the day when there wasn't that many people in the world. And that's really what they want to do, because these people aren't that smart and they don't know how to handle stuff like this, right? That's why they just kick the can down the road all the time, just kicking it down. And now we're at the point of no return, and the can can't be kicked anymore, and they don't know what to do, and they want to blame everybody else and everything else instead of taking accountability, which is what leaders do. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I've had a sketchy life, and I take accountability for that. At some point, I can't just be blaming my mom or my dad or anybody else for those actions. At some point in time, I knew right from wrong, and I knew what I did was wrong. You know what I mean? And that's why I regret all those kind of things, and that's why I'm sorry, and that's why I've been trying to make a living amends, and that's why, for the past, since 2011, I haven't committed any kind of crimes, and I've, you know what I mean? I've been living crime-free, debt-free, and everything else, you know what I mean? And so it's like, trying to just give everything back to the community because I've taken so much. I'm trying to just give everything back and be a giving and loving and service person. You know what I mean? Because that's how you spread the karmatic butter of life. You know what I mean? Because you do reap what you sow. I mean, it's just the way of the world, right? It's the universe, right? Like a boomerang. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it is what it is, people. You know what I mean? And that's why it's important. But I hope that everybody takes some solace in this and learn something good from 2020. Take something out of it. Otherwise, it will be a wasted year. Everything bad can be turned into good, people. Alright, so just realize that. And realize that through love, everything can happen, right? But love doesn't always have to be a pacifist person, too. Right? You can be strong and assertive, everything else, and still be a loving and caring and giving person. It doesn't mean you have to roll over like a bitch every little time, too. Alright? So push all that kind of shit aside and just realize that. Stay positive. Realize everything is going to happen. It is what it is. Thy will be done, right? And just realize that through all of this, we will all come out stronger, right? That hopefully we can shed all this dead skin off, and come out of this whole winter better, stronger, and this whole new year, and a better human being. All right, I love you guys, and remember, same bad time, same bad channel. Spread love, and don't hate. Appreciate.